So we're going to go through the 2024 ballot for California to talk about housing issues that appear, especially in the statewide propositions, because they're so complicated. My friends always ask me to explain the props to them, and more people are asking me each election, so I'm making a video. Having said that, this is not a political channel, so if you hear something I say and you don't agree with the policy or you don't agree with the politics, that's okay. I appreciate that you're here watching the channel. What I do want is for us to build a lot more housing. Sometimes that means helping people build in their backyards, like with ADUs. Other times it means policy and advocacy reform. But really, I think this is an issue that is a really big tent. We all need someplace to live. We all want to have lots of choices when we're picking where we're going to live. And hopefully we can all agree on that. And so whatever happens, whatever you vote on in all these different election issues, it's okay. I'm just here to share my perspective on three of the propositions. We're going to talk about Prop 5, Prop 33, and Prop 34 in California in this November upcoming election. So if you only take away one thing, I'm going to put up some slides and then you'll see kind of like how I'm thinking about these. It's more important that you get the why behind all this than kind of just walk away with my specific. But this is just for time rush people who trust me. Like that's the summary. Now let's dive into some of the details. Yeah. First, we're going to talk about 5. So I'll start with a story. In 2022, very recently, the city of Berkeley had Measure L on their ballots. And Measure L would have provided $650 million for affordable housing and transit, right? 59% of voters supported that initiative, that Measure L. So you would think with 59% of voters supporting it, it passes, right? Well, that's not how it works in California. It failed because it got 59% of voters. Any kind of initiative that spends a certain amount of money, it's referred to as, I guess, an ad valorem tax. And so Prop 5 is saying, actually, without Prop 5, we're saying in California, you need 66.666% of voters. You need over 2/3 to approve an initiative for it to actually pass. And so things like that bond initiative in Berkeley fail when they only get 59% of voters, even though that's a big majority, right? Prop 5 would say, hey, let's make it possible for cities and counties to borrow money for housing and infrastructure if 55% of voters support that, right? And the history there is that in 1978, California passed a different statewide ballot initiative that made it very hard for local governments to borrow money. It set that 66% threshold. And this would lower it back to 55%. And if we get a yes on Prop 5, the result is that very popular local bonds will pass. Right now, if we get a no on Prop 5, the result is that very popular local bonds will fail, even if only 1/3 of voters support it, right? Or sorry, oppose it. What's interesting there is like that Berkeley example, just 18,000 people voted no, and 26,500 people voted yes. And so that minority people saying no made the measure fail. And that's pretty anti-democratic, right? So Prop 5 would make it easier for local cities and counties to issue bonds to raise money for affordable housing and transit. Now, some of the reasonable opposition looks at this as a tax issue, right? A lot of people say, hey, if this is going to make it easier for cities and counties to raise taxes for the residents of those cities and counties, I don't like it because I don't like taxes. That's a very common view. At a glance, yes, Prop 5 will make it easier for voters to say yes, and that will result in cities, issuing bonds that they need to pay for through local taxes and fundraising. That's all true. But we've been living in a world of no since 1978. And you may have noticed that the state still finds a lot of ways to tax you. So I think how I would put it is cities like Berkeley, who were willing to tax their own residents to pay for that $650 million affordable housing bond, that measure, when that fails, they're still going to find ways to finance the housing. It's just mostly going to come out of state and federal tax credits. If Prop 5 passes and we can pass local bonds, then those local bonds are paid for locally. So if Berkeley wants to issue $650 million for affordable housing, they have to pay for it by taxing the Berkeley residents. They will not be taxing people in Fresno, right? But it's really hard to pass the local bonds because of that 66% rule. So guess what? We get state taxes and federal taxes to cover those costs. And whether that's state or federal tax credits, which are the most common way to finance most affordable housing, or other funding sources, all the affordable housing that gets built in Berkeley and San Francisco and all that housing, it's going to get paid by everybody if we don't make it easier for affordable housing measures locally. So for all the tax crusaders out there, God bless you, but I think you're picking the wrong fight. I think, from my perspective, if we pass Prop 5, it'll allow cities and counties to decide on their own through clear majority rule whether they should take on bonds or not. And that's Prop 5. Looking at the comments, Toronado says, I can't make sense of most of the ballot propositions, even though I tried to read up. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. That's kind of the hope here. We just went through Prop 5. We're also going to go through Prop 33 and 34. And hopefully I can just kind of put some color around it. I'm also not like a ballot initiative expert. My specialty is accessory dwelling units and building in your backyard. But I'm housing adjacent. I'm close to a lot of folks who advocate for housing. And so I end up getting a good perspective. So in summary, Prop 5 would make it easier for cities to raise money to say, hey, we want to build affordable housing or transit in our city, and we're going to tax our own residents to do it. Right now, it's a 66% majority required. We would change it to 55. I personally will be voting yes on Prop 5. And if you think you want more affordable housing projects and good transit that is responsibly funded by the people who are benefiting from it, then you would vote yes on Prop 5 as well. Now, having said that, I've got friends who are voting no. Largely, they don't like ballot initiatives is one of the main reasons. And if you hate ballot initiatives, you could see how, oh, well, maybe if we lower the threshold to 55, we'll get even more of these bond initiatives. That's a possibility, but we're getting them anyway. So I'm a yes on Prop 5. And that is why. I'm also including, if you go to the video description here, you can see my notes, my slides that I'm reading from, and you can follow links. I particularly want to just, every one of these issues, I'm including a link to read more about this. So on Prop 5, there's a link to a con website that says, hey, this is why we think you shouldn't vote for Prop 5. I want everybody to have access to this information. So no gatekeeping. Feel free to check out the link in the description below. And you can read up on this stuff beyond just my perspective. Okay, next up, let's go to Prop 33. So a little story time. Prop 33 is about rent control. And rent control is a really nuanced issue, which I'm very happy to have a long conversation about, especially if there's wine open, like a lot of wine. But the rent control is hard to get right. It's hard policy because you want it to be strong enough to protect tenants. And you also want to make sure that developers and housing providers are still incentivized to build more rental housing, so that they find it interesting to continue maintaining their rentals and doing a good job and building new rentals, importantly. So the key here is that you want to have a lot of predictability for new construction, honestly, and that's digressing a little. That's my take on rent control. It works when there's a lot of predictability for new construction, but reasonable people fall on both sides of this issue, and rent control is complicated. Having said that, this prop is not that complicated, in my opinion. The specific topic of Prop 33 is much less nuanced because, in my opinion, Prop 33 is really bad policy. The same people spent millions, tens of millions of dollars to get some version of this on the ballot in 2018 and 2020, and now in 2024. And honestly, the initiative to me is becoming worse policy each time. Prop 33, in my opinion, somehow manages to be bad, whether you love or hate rent control. I would encourage a no vote on this. Now, having said that, I'll acknowledge what I said at the top. If you do support this, it's an agree to disagree, and I appreciate that you're at least hearing me out, watching this video. Vote your conscience. I think we all want renters to have a better deal than what they're getting today, and we just disagree on whether this prop will help them or not. And now I'll go into the details. Prop 33 would do a few things. One, it would allow cities and counties to do whatever they want with rent control. About that. 3, it will prevent future statewide laws on rent control. So whether you support or oppose rent control as a concept, I think you should oppose Prop 33 because it's bad policy. In the long run, most of us are confident that it would increase the cost of housing on average and decrease housing options. In the short run, it does not actually create rent control, right? It's not creating protections for anybody. And then it creates an unpredictable environment where city by city, the rent control landscape can vary wildly. And in some of those cities, I'm telling you, it's going to be awful. NIMBYs, the not in my backyard people, they will exploit Prop 33 to effectively remove and banish renters from their cities. So currently, let me just check the chat, see if there's any questions. Good. Currently, if there are city level rent control laws, and they're usually in big cities. They cover about a quarter of Californian renters, and it's like Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Jose. They have rent control laws. And then there's state level rent control laws that exist via Costa Hawkins. It's a legislative act from the 90s. And Costa Hawkins has some limits on how much cities can do rent control. And it also, as of very recently, it has some limits, some rent control protections statewide. So rent increases are limited to 5% plus inflation up to 10%. That's a statewide limit. Then there's a limit on the rent control. So cities aren't allowed to do rent control on single family homes. Also, there's no rent control on housing built after February 1995. And generally, rent control only applies to increases for existing tenants. It does not apply to new tenants, all according to the statewide law. So the proposal of Prop 33 is to repeal that statewide law, and you would allow cities to control rent on new construction, control rent on single-family homes, and control rent for new tenants. You would also permanently make this a local issue. So this is kind of the wild part to me. This is what makes it sort of bad policy, even if you like rent control. Like if you don't like rent control, you should obviously vote no on Prop 33. If you like rent control, I still think you should think about a no vote because it's not creating like a floor of protections across the board. So immediately you lose rental protections. Then it would prevent future state legislation on this issue. So even if we wanted to come back and do a really good statewide bill, we wouldn't be able to because once it gets voted in as a ballot measure, it will be in that realm forever. There are provisions in there to keep it in this realm where the only way to change it again in the future will be another ballot measure. And then also each city will be allowed to do whatever they want. And I'm telling you, bad faith cities will use that latitude to effectively banish renters. NIMBY city councils will realize that if they make their ordinances draconian enough, developers and housing providers will avoid their towns. And I do a lot of advocacy work at the local level. So I have met the city council members who try to find ways to ban renters. Like they only want single family homeowners in their town, and they call renters or an apartment people, and they talk about it as if it's some other class of person that they don't want to exist in their town. And I'm telling you, some cities will use the latitude that Prop 33 gives them to make their town very inhospitable to any rental property at all. So that's the broad strokes on Prop 33. If there's any questions, pop them in the comments. But that's my shtick. Again, I have notes to my slides in the video description below. So you can go, I have a slide where you can read a neutral point of view, the legislative analysis on Prop 33. You can read the pro case in yesonthirty3.org, which I disagree with. You can read the no case. There's a great article in the LA Times on why Prop 33 would make the housing shortage worse. It would make it less affordable for everybody except the few people who are kind of trapped in rent-controlled units. And there is a paywall in the LA Times article, so I also have a free link to vote no on Prop 33. But check out those links in the description below. Okay, and then the last one is the quirkiest one, and maybe the pettiest ballot initiative I've ever seen. We're going to talk about Prop 34. Oh, I'm glad, Tornado. I'm glad it's helpful. We're going to talk about Prop 34 next. So another story time. Now, part of this Prop 33 that we just talked about is that there was a similar initiative on the ballot in 2018 and 2020, and now it's back. It keeps failing, and now it's back in 2024. And you're like, it's just to give you a sense, the way you get ballot initiatives on is you spend millions of dollars paying companies to collect signatures. So if you've ever left a grocery store and somebody's out there collecting signatures, they're paid per signature usually. And there are these political groups that basically spend millions of dollars to collect those signatures. And you can get almost anything on the ballot because if you pay per signature, somebody will go out and get that signature. And it's kind of a crazy system. But who is spending the millions and millions of dollars, the tens of millions of dollars to get this on the ballot 3 times since 2018? Well, funny story. There's a nonprofit organization called the AIDS Healthcare Foundation that keeps spending tens of millions of dollars to put this issue on the ballot. And the longtime president of the AIDS Healthcare Foundation is also a housing provider. Has been described in articles in the LA Times as a slumlord. That's not my word, but I will say is a housing provider. And that housing provider regularly lobbies against policies that, in my view, would create more housing. It's almost, yeah. Well, I'll leave it at that. So this is probably Prop 34 is the pettiest ballot initiative I will ever vote yes on, because what it seems to be is an initiative targeting this person specifically. It says, if you're a healthcare provider that uses a very specific federal drug discount, and you spend a lot of money on non-medical things, and you own a bunch of apartment buildings, and you rack up more than 500 high-severity health and safety violations in your buildings, then you need to spend 98% of the money you make on healthcare, and i.e., stop using the money you make from this federal drug discount on bankrolling housing ballot initiatives like Prop 33. Stick to healthcare. And so it's wild, but Prop 34 basically targets this one healthcare provider. And again, there are a lot of people who see this as a petty ballot initiative or a weird issue. The person who it would target has described it as a revenge ballot initiative. And that's, that might be a fair characterization. Having said that, this foundation does spend tens of millions of dollars. I think they've spent $40 million on promoting Prop 33, the rent control one we just talked about. And they keep coming back and they keep spending tens of millions of dollars. And if you vote yes on Prop 34, then the organizations like the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, I haven't found any others that would qualify for, but organizations like that would have to spend those tens of millions of dollars on patient healthcare instead of lobbying for this rent control provision or other non-healthcare related measures. So I'm a yes on Prop 34. And that's the 3 things I wanted to talk to. Yes on Prop 5, no on Prop 33, and yes on 34. Having said that, I really appreciate that you've watched the video this long. Hopefully it makes more sense now than it did at the beginning. But if you have any questions, pop them in the comments, and be sure to check out Cal Matters and the other links in the description below and in my slides, because that'll be a way for you to learn more about the issue. And if you see other housing issues that you want more information on, please let me know. I won't get into political endorsements or recommendations outside of housing, because that's not what this channel is about. We just want to build more housing. We want more housing options. We want everybody to have a lot of choice. So thank you for watching. Let's build some housing and vote. I don't mind which way you vote, but please do vote. It makes a big difference.